At the turn of the millennium, if you opened a fridge almost anywhere in the world, you might have found Parmalat milk. It was a massive global food company, a real pillar of Italian industry. And it was all built by one man, a guy who seemed to be the very picture of hard work and traditional values. But, as we're about to see, behind that squeaky clean image, a truly mind-boggling deception was taking place. Okay, so let's start with a number, 3.95 billion euros. In late 2002, this is how much cash the company claimed to have sitting in a Bank of America account, all held by a subsidiary called Parmalat based out in the Cayman Islands. This was supposed to be the bedrock of the company's finances, solid, undeniable proof that everything was healthy. Except there was just one little problem. When the auditors finally decided to check with Bank of America, they got a bombshell of an answer. The document, the proof of this account, it was a complete fake, a forgery. Someone had literally just scanned an old document and changed the details on a home computer. That nearly 4 billion euros, it never existed. It was just gone. And that one fake document, that was the single thread that, when pulled, brought the entire thing crashing down. It opened up this terrifying question. How on earth does a massive global company, we're talking 36,000 employees in 30 countries, hide a multi-billion euro black hole for over a decade? So who is the mastermind behind this incredible lie? To really get to the bottom of the fraud, we have to understand the man right at the very top. By December of 2003, Callisto Tanzi was no longer Italy's celebrated corporate hero. Instead, he was sitting in a Milan prison being interrogated. His entire life's work had just spectacularly imploded, and he was being accused of orchestrating one of the biggest, most brazen financial frauds in modern history. You know, to really understand how he got away with it for so long, we need to rewind. Tanzi's real genius wasn't just in business. It was in the powerful, humble public image he built for himself over decades. And look, you have to hand it to him. The guy was a genuine innovator in the beginning. He takes over his dad's tiny factory and introduces Tetra Pak cartons and UHT, that's ultra-high-temperature milk. Basically, he figured out how to give milk a 6-month shelf life. This was a total game changer. It allowed Parmalat to go from a small local business to Italy's first national milk brand. And from there, it just exploded onto the global scene. There's this Italian phrase that just perfectly nails the persona Tanzi was selling. He was seen as this deeply religious family man, totally devoted to his community in Parma. The stories were that he was in bed by 10:30, in the office by 7 a.m., and never missed Sunday Mass. This image of being a simple, hardworking, and honest man, well, it turned out to be his greatest shield. And Tanzi was a master at using this persona to build an empire of influence. He poured money into the church, which earned him a saintly reputation. He made huge donations to the ruling political party, which gave him powerful friends and easy access to bank loans. And in a stroke of genius, he bought the local soccer team, Parma, and turned them into champions. He became a local hero. You see, he was building a protective network all around him. So as we get into the 1990s and early 2000s, this empire of influence became absolutely crucial. Because while Parmalat was expanding around the globe, it was also hiding a rapidly growing, catastrophic problem. I mean, you look at this map, and on paper, this is what success looks like, right? Operations all over Europe, North and South America, everywhere. But what this map doesn't show you is the truth. A lot of this expansion was fueled by mountains of debt, and the company was bleeding cash. We're talking losses of up to $500 million a year. So how in the world did they hide it? Well, the scheme was incredibly complicated, but it basically boiled down to 4 steps. First, you set up a bunch of offshore shell companies, like Parmalat, to move money around where no one can see it. Second, you just invent fake sales, like you pretend to sell millions of dollars of powdered milk to Cuba that never existed. This creates fake revenue. And third, and this is the most important part, you just keep borrowing more and more money from investors and banks to cover your massive losses. You use that new money to pay old debts, and presto, you can make it look like you're actually making a profit. There's a quote from one of the investigators that just sums it all up so perfectly. Tanzi was running 2 businesses. One was the real one, selling milk to us, the consumers. The other business was selling a complete fantasy of financial success to investors and banks, milking them for billions of dollars. Okay, so let's jump back to the end of 2003, because when your entire company is a house of cards built on lies, it's not a question of if it's going to fall, but when. And when it finally happened, it happened with breathtaking speed. I mean, the whole thing just unraveled at lightning speed.
It all started with a little bit of suspicion in November. Then, just a few weeks later, the company defaults on a bond payment. Suddenly, Tansy's forced to resign. And then, bam, the board admits the €4 billion account is fake. By the day after Christmas, Tansy himself is in handcuffs. The whole thing imploded in just over a month.
And when the forensic accountants at PricewaterhouseCoopers finally got their hands on the real books, the scale of the deception was just staggering. The company had been telling the world it had a net debt of about 1.8 billion euros. The reality? A mind-blowing 14.3 billion euros. They had somehow hidden a 12.5 billion euro black hole. And this graph, this is what that kind of financial devastation looks like. The blue line is Parmalat's stock price. In just a matter of weeks, it went from being a solid blue-chip stock to being completely worthless. Billions of euros in savings and investments, held by huge pension funds, but also by tons of regular Italian families, just vanished. Poof. So you have to ask yourself, how does a fraud this massive go on for so long? The thing is, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. While Tanzi and his inner circle were absolutely the architects, they had help. A whole system of financial watchdogs either completely missed the red flags or, even worse, just looked the other way. Let's just break this down. You had auditors signing off on these fake accounts year after year. You had huge international banks structuring the very deals that helped Parmalat hide its debt. Then you have the rating agencies like Standard & Poor's, who kept telling everyone that Parmalat's bonds were a safe, investment-grade bet right up until the final days. And all the while, where were the regulators? They were criticized for being asleep at the wheel. And make no mistake, this wasn't just some local Italian scandal. It sent shockwaves through the entire global financial system. America's top financial regulator, the SEC, called it one of the largest and most brazen financial frauds in history. That's because Parmalat had been selling its fraudulent bonds to unsuspecting American investors for years, making this a truly international crime. So that brings us to the big final question, doesn't it? Is this just the story of one incredibly corrupt man, Callisto Tanzi, the humble milkman who fooled the world? Or was the collapse of Parmalat a symptom of something much bigger, a systemic failure where all the supposed gatekeepers of our financial system, the auditors, the bankers, the regulators, all failed, allowing one of history's biggest frauds to happen right under their noses? That's the question this whole story leaves us with.